I saw that.
I love it so much. She's all.
Oh, I know she thinks, oh, and there may be some movement there. In fact, we've identified a candidate that we're gonna talk to, so. And I'm hoping this person has much more.
Young kids.
Collaborative.
Yeah.
You know, it's right, the order, so
Okay.
we're up to. We will start with our typical introduction and overview of meeting protocols. He's got meeting slides up, and I think we'll have a couple of people that are joining remotely. Is that true, Dean?
Yes, folks online, Jim, Hughes, that's
Okay,
and the other things are virtual.
great.
Person.
So folks online, just let us know if you can't hear anything, or if you need clarification, or need any of us to project better. Folks in the room, let's do a round of intros. Dean, why don't you kick us off?
Sure, David Pierce, so we've been running a showing list of staff.
Hi there, I'm Allison. I work for the Lake Champlain Sea Grant.
I'm Ellen Fox, the MRVA, and I'm a friend.
Made it in time.
Yeah.
I'm Josh Serpy, I'm in Friends in Northern Lake Champlain.
I'm Cliff Jenkins, I was project manager in RPC.
I'm Bridget Butler. I'm the executive director for Friends of Northern Lake Champlain and serving as an alternate for Ken Henderson today.
So voting.
Yes, voting. Voting today.
I'm Heidi Fritz Valenta. I work for the Village of Swanton, and I am the rep for the NRPC Council or Commission, I believe.
Pete Benevento, I'm with the Lake Conroe Campus Association and the Franklin Watershed Committee.
I'm Lindsay White with the Missisquoi River Basin Association. I'm the chair of the WIC.
I'm Laura Weston. I am the district manager for the Franklin County NRCD, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a voting member.
I'm Nora Brown. I'm with NRPC and I'm the voting team. Folks online, you want to identify yourself?
Beth Torpy, I'm the water quality planner for NVDA, Northeastern Vermont Development Association.
Thanks, Beth.
Tucker Malone, Vermont Land Trust, filling in today as a layers alternate.
Jim Pease from DEC, retired.
Great. All right, that's everybody. Awesome. Sorry, I was just telling Lauren, my eyesight's real bad, so. I was like, I think that's everybody. Super. Meeting protocols, please stay engaged. Folks on the screen, if you can keep your cameras on, that's great, although we aren't currently seeing you, but we appreciate it anyway. If you have questions, be respectful, raise your hand physically, or folks on screen, you can either type things in the chat and we'll monitor that, or get our attention, raise your hand or ask to speak. Not actually looking at the meeting protocol, but I think that's the standard one.
We're good.
Be good meeting partners. Any conflict of interest to disclose today? I don't think we have anything that would present conflict, so should be good. On to minutes. Thanks as ever, Nora, for typing up the minutes, and thanks to both of you and Dean for sending out a great packet. Hopefully folks were able to review. Anyone has any comments or questions on the minutes? That would be fantastic. We'll take those now, and if not, we would, I would love a motion to approve.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Lauren. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Heidi. All in favor? Physically raise hand or say aye.
Hi.
God, Bridget, Heidi, Lauren, Lindsay. That's everyone in the room. I don't know who is on screen.
I just have to run to my car.
Sorry. Yeah.
I can watch on screen. Is that the best?
I know, that's what, yeah.
Nora?
Yeah, Nora, I do.
Nora's your name.
Awesome. Okay, Nora's been joined video then. Thank you, Nora. All right, so voting members on screen, we have Tucker and Beth. You guys approve minutes? Tucker says yes. Thank you, Beth. Thanks, Beth. Okay, so that does give us a 4 6, yeah. Now, of course, I've lost my place. Leave it back in. Any public comment on items not on the agenda? Or related to items not on the agenda? Did I skip over approve the agenda? Totally did. Sorry, I totally skipped over that whole line. Thank you, Nora. Nora's pointing out that I skipped over the review and adjust or approve the agenda. So start with that. Anyone have any adjustments to our agenda that I'm already going off book on? And if not, we'll seek a motion to approve.
I'll just confirm I have a key to the gate for the
Oh.
dam, so we can go look at it.
Nora already said that you had. It's just that when they said, be sure she has the key, and I thought, oh,
Great.
Have my own key then.
well, they made it sound like it was top secret.
So is there anyone willing to motion to approve our agenda as it's on the screen there?
So moved.
Thank you, Lauren. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Bridget. All in favor? We've got, I think our 4 in the room. Tucker online. Yeah, great. All right, that's our 6 voting members. Awesome. Thank you, Nora, for keeping us on track. Agenda's approved. Now, any public comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none. Dean, any budget adjustments?
I wanted to share a couple of things, including one that I might have omitted from the last meeting and I should have. But the most recent activity in this thing was an amendment to a scoping project for the conservation district. It was a 8.7% change, which means that it could be done administratively. And that increased the budget to $27,000 and so things were done in conformance. Now, the thing that I wanted to catch people up on, this is more just in terms of transparency and disclosure. There was an amendment previously to the final design project for the site that you will be visiting a little bit later. And it actually involved 2 changes, one of which we internally just figured that since the funding had been approved as part of the implementation project, that it was kind of outside the norm. So there was an initial amendment that brought it from its original to 122. I'm sorry, from its original to 117, and then there was another one that brought it to 122. But the latter was really just moving money that had been approved by the Basin Council as part of implementation and moved it into final design so that Lauren could continue to build certain activities under that. Okay. So anyway, those are the only instances of that type of work. But I also, when I was putting the slides together, thought it would be a good chance to just simply report on the expedited project development application, since we haven't had an agenda item. And I just wanted to report that we did recently process one of those for work by friends in the Fairfield Pond watershed. And that was for 10,000.
Did you mention the other one that is worth coming?
Well, I may have missed it in my copying and pasting, so I know that there are others that have been, I know that BLT has filed an application for one that I haven't processed fully, so. Is that the one you're referring to?
You sent me a draft.
You're right, but it hasn't been filed.
Right, okay.
There's one in the works.
Alright.
I don't believe we have any seating.
Well,
Oh,
kind of, sort of. I just
Okay.
wanted to bring this to the group's attention. Abby Miller, who is the assistant manager for the village, She may wear other hats as well, treasurer or something of that sort. Had indicated interest, and there is currently no alternate for Dan in Richford. But she was unable to be here today. So Abby is an incoming alternate for Dan.
Great.
I also wanted to mention that you can see in the very tiny letters. Dave Allerton, who had been the Public Works Director for St. Albans Town, has retired from that position. But his position with the Basin Council isn't contingent on his having that job. And I've reached out to Dave because I didn't want to indicate that he's gone because I haven't confirmed that he doesn't want to continue, but for now, he's still on the list. And if someone was wondering, well, why wasn't Abby listed as an alternate to Sarah, if you'd heard that Dave had retired, that's because he hasn't, and he could conceivably say that in his retirement, this is something he would like to continue to do. If he makes it clear that he doesn't want to do that, we have also had conversations with his successor, Kevin McAleer. And we're just trying to gauge his interest since the spot was previously held by Dave.
This might be a stupid question. The town of St. Albans is in the
They
Missisquoi
have a
Bay?
small portion,
Okay,
they have a small portion
okay.
that comes over through Fairfield. I mean, as I was driving here today, I'm thinking French Hill Road, and yeah, there's that little portion. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they do attend some of the Basin 5 meetings, and they have made applications there. Dave just decided this was the one he was going to be listed as an alternate for.
Great, Abby would be a great addition.
And if you're ready for the next.
Yeah, do you wanna run this one?
Sure, I threw up these slides, we're having this today because of the bylaws say in the first meeting after the change of the fiscal year, which is based on the state fiscal year. The chair and the vice chair positions are voted on. Nominations come from the floor, that's how it's always been done, but there is language in the bylaws that say actually something about, there's this possibility of creating a nominating committee, and I failed to make that clear at your last meeting so that you could say, no, we don't need a nominating committee, but we've made it. I've made some adjustments in our system, so there won't be this issue next year, but regardless, the nominations will have to come from the floor, which is what I will solicit momentarily. I've offered and I've accepted that offer's been accepted for me to just run this portion. As soon as the chair is elected, I'll turn things back to the chair. So at this point, does anybody have any nominations for the chair of the Missisquoi Basin Water Quality Council for the coming year? These are 1-year terms. I should have said.
Clarifying question, when I look at the procedures, it says members will nominate. And so I'm taking that to be voting members, whoever's acting as.
Right, so.
So nominations would only come from the 6.
Right, it
voting
would come from
members to
Lindsay,
the-
not you, unless Lindsay walked out the door. I mean,
Okay.
that's a weirdness, but.
Yeah, but just, yeah, that's what I thought.
I nominate Lindsay.
I second that.
We have a nomination from Lauren for Lindsay, and was there a second?
Yeah, Heidi.
Yes, there are several seconds. But I think Heidi was first. Lindsay, would you accept that if it was?
I would accept.
Okay. Are there any other nominations?
I would not be offended if anyone else wanted to nominate someone else.
Are there any other nominations that we would like to have the group consider, or is it time to close nominations and vote on the motion? It seems like that's the case, so all in favor of Lindsay being the chair of the Basin 6 Water Quality Council for the coming year, please say aye or raise your hand or do both.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. And
And I thought the 2 ones.
5,
Thumbs up. Yes, Beth just gave a thumbs up.
Yes, yes, I saw. So there are 5 and that's a quorum and that's a majority. And so you are elected. So Lindsay, the show is
Huzzah.
now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay. Appreciate your service.
I mean, I wrote it in as chair to the CBP, and that was the awkward thing, like, I started spending those dollars where I said I'd be chair.
That is a good point of order.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe
should
we
we
need to
change
talk about that.
when our annual meeting is?
Yeah, but it would have to happen in like March, so I
Yeah.
proposed to the increased number of hours for chair in my technical basic planning funding that just started. So if I were to not be chair,
Okay, there would have been an issue.
yeah.
Some explain it.
So there is an awkwardness there when, yeah, maybe we need to call for nominations at the spring meeting.
Okay, let's figure that out.
We
Wow.
next year.
Yeah.
Make sure
So we know.
that.
I
Um,
just wanna be it forever, that works.
So vice chair, call for nominations for vice chair. Kent is our current vice chair. He's not here to speak for himself. Did you?
I did talk to Ken.
Okay.
And he did indicate a willingness to continue if there was a vote on him.
Yeah,
I will nominate Ken.
thanks, Heidi. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thanks, Lauren. All in favor? Oh, sorry, no, other nominations. Oh, wait, no. Yes, this is just that. Other nominations?
That's
Seeing none, I will close nominations. All in favor of electing Ken Henderson to remain as vice chair, please indicate. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah.
The floating thumbs
All
up.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so we've got 6.
I like that.
Thanks.
Keeps you awake.
I don't have a choice. That's the only option given right now.
Yeah.
The thumbs up, oh, interesting.
Yeah, I'll take it though. It's kind of cute.
All right. Super. Next up. Presentation. Something,
There was a meeting packet or an item in the meeting packet that teed this up.
yeah.
Welcome Allison, and your slides are here. And they should be exactly what you suggested.
Sure, yeah, great. Hi, everybody. So apologies for a few of you who have kind of seen similar version of this, like just 2 weeks ago. I know there was a few.
I'm gonna say I appreciate you for doing it again, because I missed that.
Yeah, well, and there is maybe some slightly new information towards the end too, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But for folks who this is new, you haven't met me before, my name's Allison. I'm a flood resilience educator for the Lake Champlain Sea Grant, and essentially one of the kind of efforts that I'm working on right now is education and outreach all about the Flood Safety Act. So my organization and the Nature Conservancy have kind of teamed up to do an initial outreach campaign about a lot of the different concepts and ideas and provisions that are in this kind of pretty major piece of land use legislation that was passed last year. And because this is a pretty big change to the way that we are thinking about rivers and managing rivers, we're kind of spending a year or the better part of a year trying to introduce as many folks as possible to these concepts so that once DEC has moved forward in their rulemaking process and have kind of decided how the permitting process is going to work, none of this is hopefully too much of a surprise to most people. So there isn't, wait, what is a river corridor? What is the reason behind doing this? So this is kind of the initial phases. And so there isn't a ton of super nitty gritty details about the act itself. I can try to answer as many questions that I know of. And usually in this effort, I also have Shane Jaquith working with me. So he's at the Nature Conservancy. He had a dentist appointment this morning, so he wasn't able to join. But he also has a wealth of knowledge, and so, you know, there's questions that come up today, and I don't particularly know the answer. I'm sure that he can definitely, follow up about that, but you can go to the next slide. So, basically, the act itself, Act 121, was passed, last year, so in 2024. Kind of in response, truly in response to the flooding of 2023. So that was really a wake-up call for a lot of legislators in the state. There was a lot of pressure to kind of do something about this because it affected so much of the state, and it was a really great opportunity for folks who had been working on these types of issues to kind of strike while the iron is hot and get a lot of important things passed that they knew would help contribute to more, you know, safety and flood resilience, and try to do it at a time when there was a lot of motivation to do so. So, you know, as you can see from that rainfall map from 2023, we know that flooding doesn't follow town or county boundaries. It's really affects our state on a watershed wide and a statewide, you know, level. And so there is a lot of important work that has been being done in flood resilience at the town and county boundary, for sure, and especially regional planning commissions have been a part of that. But unless we're really doing stuff at the statewide level and thinking about doing the same thing upstream as the same thing downstream, to kind of contribute to this watershed-wide ethic of how we think about rivers, we're not going to make the progress that we need to do. So this act hopefully will enable us to do that by taking kind of this statewide, but also watershed-wide approach to the way we manage rivers. So, like I said, this was an opportunity for people who have been working on this for a while, especially the folks at the Nature Conservancy, played a big role in kind of shaping how this act came to be. But essentially, there's three major buckets. The first is all about rivers and gives DEC the authority to limit new development in river corridors statewide. So that's thinking about changing the way we think about rivers, and instead of managing rivers as a single channel, thinking about them as actually a corridor, and that is the management unit that we're thinking of. Also, there is provisions to strengthen oversight and maintenance of dams, and strategically remove derelict dams. So that's probably pretty relevant to some of the conversations you all are having about dam removal projects and things like that. So I know that talking to a lot of towns who are working on dam removals right now, like this is a pretty big interest for them. And also it's a pretty significant change to the wetland policies as well, to try to create a net gain in wetland acreage. So instead of, you know, if you were to disturb 1 acre of wetland, you have to improve or recreate 1 acre of wetland. That changes to a 2-to-1 ratio to try to build back a lot of the wetlands that we've lost in the past decades, because we know that wetlands are very important for acting like sponges all over the landscape. So those are kind of the major buckets. To the next one. So it's probably no surprise after the last couple of years, and even just like nationwide news recently, that flooding is the most common and costly recurring hazard in Vermont, but it's also the most deadly disaster in our area as well. And so Vermont is pretty unique and uniquely susceptible to flooding because of a number of different factors. First being our topography. So we're a mountainous state, and that channels water down into our narrow river valleys, often where we have a lot of our towns and historic developments. We're also seeing increased precipitation. So that's both an increase in annual precipitation as well as an increase in extreme precipitation events. And we're also kind of dealing with the consequences of our historic river management practices that unfortunately have, in a lot of cases, made us more vulnerable to the impacts of flooding. And so this image up here is, it was created by the folks at the Rivers Program, just trying to map out where are the areas of greatest damage from storms between, I think it's 1973 up there all the way to 2011. And what it shows is that almost on a 1 to 2 year basis, we're seeing really disruptive flooding events that maybe don't receive a lot of media attention beyond kind of the major ones we think about that affect the better part of the state. But for those communities, these kind of localized storms are having really significant impacts to their infrastructure and to their economies. And so it's pretty frequent. So when we talk about flood damage, it's good to just distinguish between inundation related damage and erosion related damage when it comes to flooding. And so inundation is kind of that classic photo of what happened in Montpelier in 2023, where we get a lot of rain, the rivers kind of spill out onto their floodplains and inundate areas that don't normally have water for the better part of the year. We also see a lot of damage from erosion, which is basically the undercutting, wearing away of stream banks as they're kind of responding to changes in water flow and sediment. And this can happen really quickly. It can also happen kind of slowly over time. And what we found after kind of many years of calculating the damages from flooding is that over 75% of the monetary damages are actually due to erosion. And the reason for that is because these are really expensive damages. So I've been talking with a lot of towns about this, and often what comes up is that they're paying so much money for rebuilding roads, bridges, culverts after, you know, what it feels like every year these kind of events are happening. And you know, they're not always getting reimbursed on time or reimbursed at all. And so the expenses really start to add up for these kind of damages. Go to the next slide. So just a quick little kind of how did we get to this point? Flooding is not new in Vermont. So there's been catastrophic flooding recorded all the way back to, I think it's 1869. And so we've kind of been dealing with this for a while, and we have limited flat area in our state. So we tend to build in the areas that are kind of in the floodplain because it makes sense. There's, deeper soil there. It's easier to build. We historically used our rivers to generate energy, and there was mill towns that kind of sit right alongside. And so in order to protect this infrastructure, and in some cases to try to prevent inundation related flooding, we've done a lot of things like straightening our rivers, armoring them, dredging them, berming them up so that they don't flood out onto the sides. And so those kind of two images that I think are from Huntington and Fairfield, which honestly I may have driven through Fairfield, I haven't seen this, but essentially we've tried to like push our rivers to the side of the valley walls to make room for other things that we need to do in the valley, like farming and roads and infrastructure, or we've cut a railroad track right through the river and essentially just completely separated it from its kind of normal path. So that's kind of what we're dealing with today are some of those consequences. So we can go to the next slide. And so what does this do to our rivers when we straighten them? Essentially, it increases the slope and makes rivers faster. So if you're connecting point A to point B up there, the meandering river path is going to have a greater distance, a shallower slope, and that water is probably going to be moving a lot slower compared to a more channelized stream where the slope becomes steeper and essentially the water can build up more power and eventually become more erosive. So just kind of, what is this, how is this affecting our surrounding infrastructure? Why are we seeing so much damage from erosion? Essentially, if you look at that top kind of graphic, that's showing more of your kind of natural stream profile. You've got a relatively shallow stream the banks aren't too high. Maybe on a 1 to 2 year interval, you get a storm big enough where the water will spill out onto the floodplain, and that floodplain acts like a pressure relief valve to slow the water down, hold it in place, and so that it drains a lot more slowly and it's not all just flowing downstream all at once quickly, and has a lot of water quality benefits of soaking up excess nutrients, providing good habitat for different animals. But to try to, prevent inundation from happening, if we want to put houses and infrastructure and other things in that floodplain, in a lot of areas, we've dug the river deeper. And so what that has done is, even in a 25 or 50 interval storm, the water still can't go high enough to get onto the floodplain. And so what we're seeing is that instead the river is digging itself deeper. And then in a lot of cases, I don't know if the graphics are working here, but try to advance. Maybe it will. No, that's okay. You can go back. Essentially, if you click it one more time, you'll see that the river becomes a lot wider and starts the banks started collapsing because the water doesn't have anywhere to go except dig itself deeper and erode along the side. And so what we see is damage to our surrounding roads, and our rivers become a lot more deeper, entrenched, and incised.
I've done you a disservice
Oh, it's okay.
because, I can,
If that's the only slide with real graphics.
it's the only one that has animation.
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
That's okay. No worries. I think the point is still there. Right, so maybe you have seen kind of this channel evolution diagram, but basically it's the process of when we berm a river to try to keep it from spilling onto its floodplain, it ends up digging itself deeper. Over time, the channel will start to widen because the banks are collapsing inward. Eventually, that house that's sitting on the floodplain, even though it built the berms to try to protect itself, what became, what they were trying to prevent in erosion damage now becomes damage from, or preventing inundation damage now becomes erosion damage because the banks are collapsing and we have this widening process. That eventually we do arrive down to the bottom where we have more of a stable floodplain recreated, but in that process, we've lost so much sediment that has gone downstream, again, has water quality impacts. And so what we've seen is that DEC has assessed over 5,000 miles of rivers around the state, and 75% of these river miles are undergoing channel evolution. So they sit somewhere in the middle of that process, which is where we're seeing a lot of stream banks collapsing, damage from erosion during heavy storms. And so that's kind of where we find ourselves today, which is part of the reason why the erosion damage is so frequent in our state. So in Vermont and around the country, we've historically relied on the National Flood Insurance Program to try to protect ourselves against flood risk. And the NFIP does do a good job at protecting us against inundation risk. And so, it's all about elevation. How is your house in relation to the 100-year floodplain? And so even though we do get good information out of that, it's really not telling us anything about erosion hazards. And so this is just an example of a house that is 100 feet from the NFIP floodplain and 8 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. But during Tropical Storm Irene in 2011, it experienced a lot of damage. And so the result of that is that these folks aren't eligible for a lot of the recovery benefits that you might have if your house is in the NFIP. You're not eligible for a buyout in a lot of cases unless the town or the state is stepping in to do that. And so there's really no real comprehensive protection at this point for folks that unfortunately live in this highly hazardous river corridor. due to erosion.
Well, homeowners outside of the flood map area can still get insurance.
They can, yes.
I would just, that homeowner would have needed
Yes.
to say, I'm outside. but I
Yes, so, and a lot of times they aren't aware that, that they are in danger because they're only, you know, we're kind of taught to think about flooding as, well, if you're high enough, then you're safe. You know, if your basement is above the 100-year floodplain, then you don't need to worry about it. Then again, in Vermont, a lot of our maps are out of date, and so that's another thing that we're dealing with is that in some cases, even the floodplain maps don't accurately tell us the true risk. But inherently, you're much less protected if you aren't in kind of that mapped FEMA area. So you're still eligible for, you know, some statewide help and things like that, but FEMA's not gonna do a buyout on your house if that's the case. So we do have very good, and this is where it comes into who can buy flood insurance. Anybody who lives in any of those towns that are participating in the NFIP can purchase flood insurance. So your town has to participate, but even if you yourself don't live in the mapped FEMA flood hazard area, you still can purchase insurance. It is wildly expensive, and it doesn't even break even. So the reason why we have the NFIP in the first place is because the private insurance industry stepped out of covering flood costs back in the 60s because it was too expensive and they were losing money. And so there was an act of Congress to create the National Flood Insurance Program. So it's certainly not perfect, but it does provide protection to folks that live in floodplains. So, you know, we look at this map and we think, great, we're, you know, every town except 20, I think, are participating in this program. That means so many people have the option to protect themselves against flooding. But if we move to the next slide, we know that we also need to protect against erosional hazards too. And so this is kind of where the river corridor comes in. And so essentially that's the area on either side of the river where we expect the channel to adjust over time. We can kind of think of it as the wiggle room that the river needs to accommodate changes in energy and allows the river to find its least erosive path over time. Next slide. So if we're thinking about, you know, actually finding some kind of comprehensive way to protect us against all the different risks associated with flooding, we really need to consider both the river corridor and the inundation hazard area. And so in a lot of cases, they do overlap, but in many they don't. And so that's where hopefully, you know, as we're starting to think about river corridors and managing them in a way that this act will allow, that hopefully we're starting to fully think about flood risks when we're thinking about where we're going to put our future development. Slide. And so this is just, you know, comparing this map to the NFIP participation map. These are towns that have actually themselves taken the initiative to regulate river corridors in their town, essentially in a lot of cases preventing new development in the river corridor unless there's certain alternatives met. You can get a permit, but essentially those towns in orange have the full river corridor protections. They've adopted a bylaw at the town level. The towns in orange have some kind of protection that meaningfully exceeds the NFIP standards that in some way incorporates erosion hazards. So at the moment, this is kind of where we stand here in 2025. It's much more of a patchwork of towns. And so, you know, we're just not seeing the type of participation in this kind of flood protection that would actually have a meaningful impact statewide. The next slide. So thinking about moving into the future, now that the Flood Safety Act has been passed, essentially there's kind of a long runway all the way until 2028 when these rules actually go into effect. But what has begun and will continue throughout next year is this education and outreach period. And this is kind of what we have begun in the summer, will continue kind of throughout the fall and the winter. And then at some point, DEC will kind of take over and will have more details about how this is actually gonna work in practice. And so hopefully this isn't the last time you're gonna hear about this. You're probably gonna be hearing about this plenty more in the next couple of years. But they purposefully wrote in this education and outreach period into the legislation itself, because I think folks who have been working on this for a while knew that this is going to be kind of a mindset change to the way that we think about rivers. And I was listening to the Vermont edition noontime radio hour yesterday. They were talking about the Flood Safety Act and some of the reporting, and someone was asked, I don't know if it was Kevin Geiger or the guy who actually wrote the article about the Flood Safety Act, but like, if you had a pie in the sky dream about how we're actually gonna deal with flooding, you know, what would that be? And the guy said, we need a mindset change about how we're thinking about rivers. And so hope, I'm listening to it after the fact at the 7 o'clock rebroadcast, and I kind of wish I'd called in and said, we're trying to do that. And so, but it takes a while, and this is gonna be ongoing, you know, it's stipulated until 2027, but of course, education will continue on kind of these concepts. But essentially, there's also provisions to identify areas within existing settlements that are within the river corridor where further development won't increase erosional hazards. So I was giving this presentation in Montpelier. That's a pretty clear place where we've already locked the river in place. So further development in most of their downtown, even if it's in the river corridor, isn't gonna further increase erosion hazards. So there is a process in place to identify those areas, which will be exempt from the permitting process. And so that the methodology for figuring that out is kind of still in the works, but I think within the next year or so, we'll start to see some maps for that about what that's actually gonna look like.
Could you just say
Yeah.
that again?
Yeah.
I didn't quite follow
Sure,
what you
so.
were saying there.
So essentially, what this law is going to do is, you know, any new development in a river corridor will have to receive a permit after 2028, except for certain areas in downtown areas that have been mapped, that we know that further development isn't going to make erosion any worse, or because the river is basically locked in place. You know, we're not gonna return it back to its natural setting in a lot of our downtown areas. And so it's recognizing that, you know, these are economic centers of our state. They're important. We have historic downtowns next to a lot of rivers. And so there is a process to identify those places where you would be exempt from a permit, even if you were trying to build in the river corridor. And so we don't know where those areas are yet, because they're still kind of figuring out how that's gonna work. But probably within a year, we'll have maps that kind of show what that's gonna look like.
And I follow what you're saying. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, like, but doesn't it increase the potential for inundation damage expenses?
Well,
Like, are
so
we
it depends if
investing?
it's in the floodplain or not. So if you've got, you know, your downtown center is kind of high up, it's still next to the river, so it might be in the river corridor, but it's not at damage for inundation flooding.
Got it.
Right now, there isn't any rules that prevent that. You know, that any kind of regulations that would affect how that is being built. Still, anywhere in a downtown area that is being built in a 100-year floodplain, if your town participates in the NFIP, then there are currently regulations about how that needs to be built. It has to be like, you know, certain feet above elevation, or take certain building standards into account.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is DEC making those maps, or who's making? those
So I
determinations?
think it's a consultant. I might be SLR. And that's figuring out the methods for how they're gonna do that. So right now, they've done a couple of pilot towns. I seem to remember Johnson is one of them, and so they're kind of figuring out how this is gonna work to be able to do it on a large scale. So it's a consultant, but also the Nature Conservancy also is, has some kind of, involvement in that as well, but I think it is still pretty closely, you know, they're working with DEC on kind of how this is gonna work, but yeah, it is a work in progress, and, I had a map, I don't need to pull it up, but basically like, it's just showing, you know, you've got a river corridor, an orange polygon is right there that's showing, you know, those are the areas that are exempt basically from these new rules.
And then, I just see like you're updating, or they're gonna update the river corridor. Are they updating the whole river corridor map or just to include the existing settlements? Cause I know the river corridor maps originally were drawn in a pretty interesting way to begin with. Where like the river corridor ends at a state highway, even if
Yeah.
it should be the
Yeah.
whole way.
Right, so it is, right, so if they were drawn in ways that if it's up against a valley wall or up against some kind of major infrastructure like a highway, right, it just stops there.
Yeah.
Because we're not realistically gonna be taking out that highway to let it
Right.
do its full meander. So I think the process is that, yes, they're updating the map and basically, or maybe it's gonna be a new layer, essentially, that it's like, okay, these areas within the river corridor these polygons are exempt, basically, is kind of the way that I've seen it in just some of the preliminary maps that, I've seen, but.
One more question for you.
Yeah,
just 'cause I'm-
yeah.
I'm intimately familiar with these river corridor maps.
Yeah.
Aren't on headwater streams, isn't there like a general rule that like it's 50 feet on either side? Is the
Yeah.
river corridor, are those being reevaluated?
So that's a good question, and the feedback that we've been getting from a lot of towns is like, okay, well, we already have a river corridor rule, how does this affect us? And
Sure.
basically, it's kind of setting a statewide minimum standard. So similar to how the NFIP is currently run, there's statewide minimum standards. It'll be the same for river corridors, but only for rivers that have watersheds greater than 2 square miles. Because that's all we have maps for. The incentive that towns may have to still regulate river corridors on their own is that they could choose to have 50-foot setbacks on those smaller streams. So maybe you have the same standards as the state for the actual river corridors, but then you have a town bylaw that says actually on those smaller streams, you can't build closer than. So that, and part of the incentive that towns have for doing this on their own as it currently stands is they're eligible for greater disaster recovery under the ERAP program, so Emergency Relief Assistance Fund, I think. Essentially, you know, if towns are doing nothing, I think they're eligible for 7.5% reimbursement from the state. If they're doing a bunch of things, plus they regulate their river corridors, they're eligible for 17.5% reimbursement from the state. And so that's been kind of the incentive to try to get towns to take these additional steps to protect their infrastructure from flooding. With now river corridors being at the state level, the future of those ERAF incentives are kind of unknown at this point. It might be something like, well, if a town also regulates a 50-foot setback, then they'll be eligible for that. So we don't know at this point. That's something that I've heard thrown out. But it's definitely something that the folks at the river program would like towns to do. Yeah.
So, probably this is too much in the weeds, but like administratively though, the town won't really have jurisdiction anymore over the river.
So
that'll be a state permitting process.
So they will be able to choose to do it themselves. Okay, which again, that whole piece is still up in the air because a lot of towns have expressed the desire to actually do this themselves. For any town that doesn't have existing bylaws, or they, you know, they don't want any, they don't want this responsibility, the Ds will be
Right, okay.
the regulations.
So then, has there been discussion about a vision for, say, a town that has no zoning at all? You know, I mean, the best laid plans go nowhere if there's no enforcement. Has there been discussion about how, I mean, the buildings will go up next to the river and nobody will even know?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like what,
Yeah,
how are they gonna enforce?
Yeah.
Enforcement or monitoring?
yeah, that I don't know the answer to, but it's a really good question.
Ellen, there are some towns like Alberta that don't have comprehensive zoning, but have flood regulations.
Right.
So there is that
IP,
possibility.
Yeah,
Right.
But enforcement is the issue, you know, this delegation
Yeah.
idea is really very much
Yeah.
like the shoreline stuff.
yes.
And that raises the same issues, like
Yeah.
how good is the enforcement gonna be?
Right. Right, because we know with shoreline, so there isn't always, right? So, good question, but that's one I would like to bring back to, the rivers people. Yeah.
Are you done with your presentation?
Yes, yeah, that's pretty much it. If you do go to the last slide, maybe it's just the next one. More than.
But it's still not.
Well, anyways, it's just all about that there are more resources coming, so, we're working really closely with, the folks at the Rivers Program to, create a webpage for a lot of this, so it's gonna be, on the Flood Ready website. So there's gonna be its own separate, website page that basically will have, and I think it's just the one slide before that. Yes, cool. So, floodready.vermont.gov. It is not there currently because we're still working on it. But what we have done is through these, you know, little more than a dozen meetings that we've had so far about this, we are taking questions that people have and we're trying to come up with, you know, an FAQ similar to a lot of the questions you all have been asking. Some infographics, so that's one that was created before the act was passed, so it has S213 up there, but essentially it has a lot of the same things, so we're creating a lot of like outreach materials that could be useful, that will be on that Flood Ready website. They're just still slightly in development, so hopefully in the next month or two, there'll be stuff up there. So, you know, if folks have more questions about this, or if you're getting questions about this, that can be one place to direct people to.
Jim has a question. Jim is
Oh,
answering.
yeah, sure.
Well, thank you, Allison. That was pretty informative. I guess just going back to that delegation question, my guess is that if, like with wastewater, you know, they were pretty strict about delegating the permitting authority to towns, that didn't have the resources to develop, you know, to be able to manage the permitting of it. I mean, I think, Dean, maybe you know, but I know Colchester got the right to permit septic systems, but most towns did not. And I'm just wondering, you know, if there's a parallel with you know, with floodplain issues, I mean, and rivers. I mean, Rob Evans would know the answer to that, and maybe it's going to be figured out over time. But I mean, my guess is that, you know, when we delegate permitting authority, they really have to be convinced that it will be, you know, it'll be properly implemented.
Right.
And towns without resources probably wouldn't qualify.
Right, so like, what's the process of ensuring that a town has the capability to regulate themselves?
Right.
Yeah,
Jim, I guess I would offer a differing opinion. I mean, with wastewater, I think there are two municipalities, Colchester and Charlotte, that are doing wastewater. But I don't know how many communities are doing shoreline. And I think the bar for doing shoreline is nothing like the bar for wastewater. And so I guess the question is where will it be on that spectrum?
Right, I
Because-
agree. I think it really depends on how, you know, they want to make it as broad based as they can. But like you were pointing out, if there's no enforcement, if there's no, you know, regulatory foot or that can make this happen, I would get, I mean, I don't know, rivers, you know, yeah, they're somewhere in between. I mean, it's not a human health issue, so if there's a violation, if there's a, you know, it just means greater hazard. So yeah, it's got to be, you know, it's going to be up to the process. You're right. You're right.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that we don't really know the answer to yet, is how this is gonna work on kind of a individual town basis, if it's not just DEC has the authority to regulate, if towns wanna share that authority, if they're even going to be able to, because we don't really know that yet either. Yeah, I think it's still something that we're waiting to hear information on.
I'd imagine there's some equity issues also
Yeah.
in terms of, you know, towns that have a lot of infrastructure that are economically vibrant and successful, we'll say, you know, are way more likely to have exemptions to further grow and further invest in their economic development, whereas small towns that we built right on the river, you know, for somebody from Montpelier, they would say, this is a rural area, and for people that live there, like, this is the dense village, you know, and so.
Yeah.
But they don't have the capacity, so anyway.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. to see
Yeah,
the
yeah.
process of this.
Yeah, and I do know, you know, with the infill mapping process, I
Yeah.
think there's going to be, you know, some public input, feedback gathering as those maps are starting to come out. Because it does have a pretty big impact on these areas that are economically important to most of our towns. So, you know, at this point, we know kind of what the goal is and what they're trying to do. How it's actually gonna work out in practice, again, is something that I don't think we have all the information on yet. But
The beginning of the presentation kind of talks about these three buckets, and then we talk about one bucket. What is the dam stuff gonna look like, and what is the wetland
Yes.
stuff gonna look like?
yeah, so the education and outreach period that's stipulated by the act just has to do with the river corridors.
Hmm.
Which is interesting. And so that's kind of what we've been tasked to work on. And so what we've done is we've tried to start conversations with the folks at the wetlands program and dam safety to all be on the same page. Like because as of right now, we know what's in the act itself. But if there has been, you know, updates, we want to be aware of those so that we can answer questions, because people end up having questions about this. What I do know is for wetlands, because that is also some significant changes to the way that they're mapping wetlands, and then the way that you know, they're permitting for different uses in wetlands and what that means. They have been doing and they will continue doing public input meetings by watershed, and so they've done one in the Otter Lewis watershed, they've done one in the Winooski watershed, essentially to get input on the new maps, to make people aware that, you know, even though what might look like on an online version, oh, there's no wetlands there, we have improved our wetland mapping capacities, and so they're doing that watershed by watershed, and so there's gonna be a lot of conflicts that will probably emerge. And so I attended the meeting for the Winooski watershed, and there was definitely some contention there, because somebody's property who wasn't previously mapped as a wetland now is mapped as a wetland, and so that has impact for them. And so that's something that I know that they're doing right now. So that, you know, part of this process is remapping wetlands, and then also changing the rules about you know, trying to create that net gain, the 2-to-1 policy. But yeah, we're hoping to add more resources about that on the website too. So to keep these kind of public talks, and informational meetings somewhat short. We're always happy to answer questions related to dams and wetlands as far as we know, but on the Flood Ready website, I think there will be more information because we're gonna try to get any kind of updates from dam safety and from wetlands program onto there as well.
And then last question, I promise.
Yeah.
Is the goal of this law new rules? Or is it money to actually make changes?
So what I have been advised on when I'm talking about this is to really stress the safety piece. Because truly the goal is we need to stop putting future stuff in these really hazardous areas where we know there's gonna be future trauma, future property damage, future losses, things like that. So if we had, yes, it's new rules. So I think in a lot of my communications and how I'm talking about this, I'm trying not to use the word regulation, but it does inevitably come up. But I do really think that the goal of it is safety, yeah.
Right, I guess I'm just thinking like
Yeah.
for dams in particular,
Yeah,
like the safety isn't don't build more dams.
right,
The safety is fix old dams or remove
Right.
old dams, and so I think that one in particular.
Yeah.
is jumping out to me.
yeah, and part of what the act does is hopefully open up more money for dam removal.
Okay.
So there's some authority changing and then also creating new avenues for funding of
Right.
removing dams. So hopefully there'll be, more money for projects available.
I just wanted to ask, because
Yeah.
we had kind of a nuanced situation
Yeah.
with the Highgate Falls Dam. There's a bladder, it broke a few years ago and sent enough river down that we had substantial flooding in Swanton
Yeah.
on Monument Road.
Okay.
And the flooding was more a result of ice.
Yeah.
Is the way we understood it, like the ice could not pass the amount of sediment in the river. The sediment was helping to create the jam.
Yeah.
Which did a huge amount of damage
Yeah.
to Swanton.
Yeah.
Not really, wouldn't have been
Yeah.
inundation without
Right.
the ice factor.
Yeah, the ice
And the
dams
sediment.
are a unique situation, which is I can only kind of assume is probably getting worse due to climate change because we see these really quick increases in
Massive
temperature
amount of
where
sediment, yeah.
everything's frozen, all of a sudden things aren't.
Correct.
The ice that is left there causes a lot of problems, and so Flood Safety Act, I don't know how much can be helped with ice dams.
And it really frowns on dredging,
Yeah.
which could possibly be a solution in that area where there is a lot of floodplain.
Yeah, trying to figure out where the ice, tends to form and maybe trying to change something about the river there so that it doesn't get, blocked up,
Yeah,
but
there is a potential now.
I know
if the
that-
bladder failed, so we're
Yeah.
in the same spot.
yeah.
Again,
that-
those people downstream are at risk.
Yeah, the
because
folks at the National Weather Service during like March, April. Do a whole ice dam survey, like they drive around to areas where they know that ice dams tend to form. So that hopefully we're aware if a risk is present and, maybe you can get a crane in there and try to remove some of the ice, like. Montpelier had a big problem with that, so they actually rerouted their treated stormwater, which is warmer, to the areas where the ice tends to form, to try to melt it out. But yeah, it's a huge, and I know we're definitely over time here.
Sorry.
It
was a great
yeah.
presentation.
Yeah, it's a good point that, especially it seems like up here in kind of the Missisquoi area is ice dams tend to be a big problem.
Wasn't trying to cut you off,
Yeah.
I wanted to just riff off one thing that
Yeah.
Lauren said about, is it about money or is it about regulations?
Yeah.
I wanted to make a connection to the work of the Vigilant Councils and clean water service providers at phosphorus. Because from my perspective, part of what this law is doing is buttressing some of the thinking that went into the FFI tool. If you dig into the FFI tool, you see that it makes some assumptions about how much phosphorus reduction benefit is coming as a result of flood regs. And I know that when I started, it's a pretty significant chunk. And from the standpoint of someone who's worked at the municipal level many years, I wasn't sure about the enforcement. And one of the things that the law does is make me feel like some of the assumptions in the FFI tool are starting to sound like they make more sense if there is greater enforcement or policing of what happens at floodplains. So that's maybe another possible explanation. And we're providing money for the part that's not credited to regulations.
Basically, there's a lot of things that people who have been working in this field for a while wanted to see some kind of legislation on. And so they quickly moved into action and combined a lot of things. So generally it's around flood safety.
Yeah.
You know, with dams, I feel like that's kind of the one that is, you know, it's related, but I think it was partly they're trying to, like, even in the flood safety, there's something about encapsulated docks, the foam docks that they got stuck in there at the very end. I didn't even read that before. I was like, oh, okay. So there's a lot of things that people wanted to see done that you know, they tried to get it in there while the motivation was there.
The only other thing I wanted to mention, take note of the fact that Ted is here, so another member of the council is on board.
Hi, Ted.
Hello.
Dean, do you have planned to mention the August 12th meeting that Sean Coleman is?
Do I have planned to mention what?
The August 12th meeting that Sean Coleman is hosting, I guess?
The August 12th meeting, John, so is that the one in St. Albans City or?
Yeah, oh, it's John Goff from National Weather
I
Service.
just got a copy of the email from Sean yesterday.
Okay, yeah, I don't
So
know,
please-
yeah, so I got it 2 days ago from John.
Always the last to know.
I still don't know about it, so.
Yeah,
What is
I
happening?
was realizing, I was like,
So
oh gosh, I don't know how this has been advertised, but this is the group that I should tell about. So John Goff from National Weather Service in Burlington will be presenting on new flood inundation mapping services Tuesday, August 12th, 9 AM at the City Council Chambers in St. Albans or sit via Zoom. So I will send this to Dean if you don't mind sending it out,
I think-
or actually if you have it, if you don't mind sending it out to everybody. 9 AM,
What's the date again?
next Tuesday.
Yeah, there's new maps right now for most of the watersheds in Vermont, so that's a whole nother other
Right.
education thing that's happening, so, yes,
Well, that's new FEMA map.
it is.
This is
Oh,
actually.
Flood inundation mapping.
Oh.
So they've done it for
No,
Bennington and
National
Wyndham
Weather
County
Service
Yes.
and are now
kind of-
pitching it for the rest of the
Yeah.
state.
It's a whole nother word.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Yes,
Lots
so much.
of
So
different
much is
entities.
right.
I've got a question that I know I should be able to answer, but like as more people have asked me this question, I feel like I answer it less and less well. And this might get some chuckles. Why can't we dredge once? I feel like if we know that we're in stage 2 to 4, or not in stage 5, or not in stage 1, we know we're just sending like our whole watersheds downstream and have for the past 150 years. And I guess there's like this piece of me that I understand it would disrupt fisheries, but so is everything else we are doing. And I know it'd be expensive, but so is everything else that we are doing.
Thinking that it will fill in with all the other sediment that we're sending downstream and it doesn't go to the lake.
No, like dredge the lake and dredge some of the rivers to get them back to, like, we have floodplain restoration and stream restoration. It just feels like we're not using that one tool in the toolbox.
I think, like, my understanding is, for a lot of cases, dredging isn't a one-time thing. You have to come back and continually do it because it fills back in.
But
It
if,
returns to basically what it was.
right, but if we're doing that as part of like a larger watershed scale kind of thing, I guess it's. I don't know, I think this may be a question for like Stacy and others, and I'm just.
I get that question, and it's about volume for the lay person. You're like,
Right.
well, if there's not enough space in the channel, let's dredge the channel back out, so the
Right.
water stays in. And we won't have a flood. That's the
Right.
question I get a lot.
Mhm.
And it's like, that's true for this instance in time, but for how long? And how far upstream are you gonna go? Like, okay, if you're gonna dredge, where do you stop? Wherever you stop, you just move the slope that you would have changed down here to up there.
Yeah.
And so it's all connected. To think of it
And
as
then you-
one big ongoing dynamic system, I think helps. Some people say, oh yeah, like, it's like, well, if we're gonna stop, if we're gonna do it once and then stop.
Right.
If not now, then when, kind of thing, you know, like, if we're stopping, then we're stopping. You know what I mean?
And the interesting thing about like dredging, digging the river deeper, we think about how upstream actions have downstream impacts. That's kind of the general way we think about it. Digging the river deeper, you can do it downstream and it has upstream impacts because the head cutting process starts to move upstream. And then with the case of trying to create volume, I think it was Kevin Geiger, who I listened to a presentation, said it really well, because he actually put like gallons to it, like in a X square acre watershed. If you get a 2-inch storm, which isn't even that crazy these days, you would have to dig the river, I don't know how many feet down. There's not enough. We can't dig it deep enough to protect ourselves against inundation from the types of storms that we get, essentially.
Sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
thinking too about, and I remember this from the last time I saw you present this, the whole disconnect around inundation being bad in all cases, right? So like you were just saying, like, we want to keep the water in the riverbed when that's not naturally gonna happen, right? We need the floodplain. So that's I feel like that's another like communication challenge.
Yeah.
Is that there's like extreme inundation that impacts our infrastructure, but then there's good inundation into the floodplain
Right. And
that
which
is
we need
dissipating.
more of
We need that,
in-
but the public
Right.
doesn't get that, right?
And
So-
I even heard it yesterday too, when Michaela Lafrac is talking about flooding, and she said something related to, well, we just need to make it stop flooding, or whatever, and it's like,
Like,
well,
no,
we're
we
not.
need that.
We're not gonna be able to, and actually, we need more places on the landscape where it can flood, where it's not gonna harm our infrastructure, cause damage, so that the water can attenuate, the floodwaters attenuate further upstream, and they don't all get sent down at once. It's kind of like, and I keep making the connection, it's like flattening the curve, you know, we were talking about that in COVID. We don't want all the COVID cases all at once. We want a shallower curve. Same thing with our, hydrographs. We want to flatten the curve. We don't want this big wall of water all at once. We want it to slowly drain from the landscape. It's the same volume of water, but it's not going to get to as high of a level if it's not coming all at once. And so there's really cool research coming out of UVM and Kristen Underwood and Rebecca Deal, who are trying to map the landscape and try to find areas where floodplains are going to have the most attenuation potential. Some watersheds have like no potential, like in Plainfield, that whole watershed, it's so steep. There really isn't anywhere actually to create more floodplain to attenuate the water coming down into Plainfield. There's other areas, maybe even probably around here where, it's not quite as steep, you still have rolling hills, but maybe there is more areas where we can keep that water upstream for longer during heavy storms so that it's slowly draining out. And, so floodplains are really, really important in our efforts to try to mitigate damage. Like I try to talk about flooding, we're trying to stop damage. We're not trying to stop
Flooding, yes, right. So that's where I get really curious about messaging, the
Yeah,
language.
Which I think is not in the general public's understanding.
Do you see Ted?
No, I
Maybe
think-
he's the last one.
I think,
Oh, sorry.
people I talk to understand it, I just disagree with it.
Yeah.
They think that
Just,
we're in charge, humans are in charge. This place that's dry, I need it to be dry all the time,
Right.
you know, or I want it to flood when I want it to flood. So that mind shift that you were talking about.
Mindset, yeah.
I think that that's it.
And I mean, it's land use conflicts, like where is this gonna happen?
Exactly.
Because, you know, we don't want it to flood farmers' land because that's detrimental to them. We don't want it to flood our towns, we don't want it to flood, you know.
Sometimes you want it to flood, though.
Right.
It brings
I
the
just
green-
wanna give space for Ted to.
Okay, yeah, sorry, Ted.
I think this is a fascinating conversation because I've been having this conversation for 20 odd years.
Yeah.
I like the question, why don't we dredge? And the reason why I would shy away from it is you're gonna have the toughest sell to Army Corps of Engineers. They're gonna need a lot of proof of concept that you actually need that to happen. It's already somewhat of a hurdle to remove dikes and berms. Let alone go digging in the river and the consequences to the native aquatic fauna and flora therein. And I forgot who the presenter's name is, but everything you said jives from what I learned out west. If you start dredging, you have to continue all the way down into streams, or else you get these massive head cuts moving upstream. That's why the Corps of Engineers only allows dredging on the bigger major economic thoroughways that allow barges. Because that's where the depositional areas are. If you start dredging in a transport reach type plain bed areas, you just you're inviting yourself a forever cycle. So it's not quite the remedy, but I agree with Ellen. I feel like I have this conversation with every landowner I meet that hasn't been present for any of our meetings.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ted.
Well, thanks for that lively discussion. Thanks, Allison, very much for the presentation. We'll definitely be in touch and get you tied in some
It's
more.
an ongoing conversation, so hopefully there will be more details coming out. You all have big questions and a lot of it is still being.
And I saw that the last slide was feedback, so there's not.
Yeah.
People to provide.
Yeah, so there is definitely, and definitely I would encourage, you can, go to the last slide there. This is particularly when I'm presenting to different towns and boards or committees, like, you know, they're the folks that are dealing with zoning at the town level and regulations and we do want to, so all of this feedback is going back to DEC. Questions, comments, concerns, ideas. Yeah, so it sounds like maybe you'll have the slides, so definitely feel free to add anything to that.
Keep going. You don't want to send, all Cliff's got to do is make a new guy. Yeah.
So.
Do onward.
Yeah.
Also, we missed you, Allison. Welcome.
Yeah, well, last time I was in this room was a Missisquoi partners meeting.
So that's the intro.
That's our,
from Cliff.
okay, all right, our update. Cliff, take it away.
Yeah, hello everyone, I'm Cliff. This is gonna be a much dinkier presentation. I'm gonna give you a quick update on the Missisquoi Bay Causeway project, situation where we are right now. So if anyone's not familiar, just a little background, in the 90s, E-Trans began planning for replacement structures for the 4,200 foot causeway connecting Swan and Alberg. It's generated some controversy since many wanted the causeway to be completely removed to allow for greater water circulation, lake, and have all the subsequent water quality and aquatic wildlife improvements. So there's a study that ends up being conducted by the International Joint Commissions, so close to the Canadian border. This comes out and says water quality impacts would be limited, but ecologists then determined that you have some spiny soft-shell turtles, which are state endangered species living on the causeway, meaning that it was repaired but left largely intact. Right. So after that, we have a large chunk of this money that was earmarked for the project that was not spent on bridge repairs. But there's a bit of a problem where it should go.
Can you talk a little louder?
Oh, yeah, of course. So it was, like I said, this money was federally earmarked and couldn't return to the general treasury or an unrelated state project. So a decision was made to redirect these funds to other projects in the Missisquoi Basin that were both transportation and water quality related, like the Causeway project would have been. So it would remain in compliance with the original earmark. So back in 2019, NRPC began helping organize the project identification and prioritization effort. A lot of stops and starts, a lot of trying to get V-Trans attention and kind of getting crickets. But now we're hopefully in a position where we can serve as the project manager for the list of projects that were generated out of this effort back in 2019. Go to the next slide. In March, we began meeting with V-Trans to discuss moving forward with this project list, what gaps needed to be filled, what projects would qualify under V-Trans guidance, what our role as a project manager would be, et cetera. Basic idea here is that we've generated this list of prioritized projects, following guidance from V-Trans, which would then be shared with DEC, who would then vet them accordingly along water quality considerations. So this has been completed, and of a list of about, I'm unclear on how many phases the list went through, but the one that DEC shot down was the Missisquoi Road bank stabilization, because they determined that it was too transportation focused. So after removing Missisquoi and finding additional location and WPD ID information that we needed, we ended up with 9 projects. There were mostly culvert and bridge replacements. There was a stormwater project development situation and a bank stabilization project. I should mention that most of these project ideas that we generated for this list were coming out of stormwater master plans. So many of them are. It's the one with the stage. Sometimes you gotta jam it. I'll be out in like 1 minute. So that just means that most of the projects on here are have been identified through the project development work and are then moving towards initial design would be the next step. There's one that we have a preliminary design that would then move to final design. And then there's the stormwater project development work, which is obviously the project development. So where we are now, we're in a bit of a holding pattern with V-Trans. So we've developed a scope of work that's been sent to them, emphasizing tracking along V-Trans municipal project standards, just kind of a pain in the butt where we are adapting water quality projects that were identified in water quality in the stormwater master plans and things like that, and then making sure that they're, we're filling out all the proper steps, because it's also technically a V-Trans project. Boring paperwork stuff. But during our last meeting with V-Trans in mid-July, we were told that the Federal Highway Administration has funding questions on all statewide programming, which would affect the status of all of this. They told us that it would take about a month on their end to figure things out, and then with an agreement with us as the project management agreement for us belonging to that. This means there's currently no agreement, so we have no way to bill our time. That's the holding pattern. We've also heard that these funding discussions could cause some of the 9 projects on this list to be cut by V-Trans. So this means that there might be additional space to identify more projects if projects on the list are removed for whatever reason. We already know that Missisquoi Road's been removed, so there's potential there to bring on new projects. But since we don't know what and if, we don't know what's being removed and why, we can't, as of now, develop criteria for taking on new projects. So it's kind of a shrug on this in terms of how to bring anything else on. That's what I have, Dean. Is there anything?
Yeah, well, maybe I can fill in some things and
Please.
maybe you can help.
We're getting in my car. Yeah.
I'll just spin for a little bit. Some of you have been around long enough to know how controversial the Causeway project was. The V-Trans started planning it in the 90s, and it wasn't built until like 2007, but in all of that time, because of people who are concerned about water quality in the Missisquoi Bay, they were saying, get rid of the causeway because the causeway is causing all the problems in our water quality. At least that was some of the perception. And like Cliff said, and I don't know if it really registers necessarily, how many of you know what the International Joint Commission is? The IJC was involved in studying what was going on and whether or not doing what some people wanted would have really improved the water quality. And their conclusion was science says, no, it isn't really gonna change things much. So there was this money left over, and I think the original earmark was something like $55 million. It was not a small amount of money. But it ended up being less costly. I don't know what the number was. And so then everybody's looking at, well, like, money draws attention. And there was this question like, well, what are we gonna do with it? We don't wanna hand it back. V-Trans never wants to send any money back to Washington. So there was this decision made that the money could go to other projects that are definite. There's the transportation and water quality nexus in the Missisquoi watershed. Because where's the water that is in this Missisquoi Bay coming from? It's coming from the watershed. So what I had understood was that, so the Regional Planning Commission is involved in something called the Transportation Planning Initiative, the TPI. So we do work essentially for V-Trans, and there's an advisory committee that's kind of like the Basin Council. And they were involved. It was part of the TPI work plan that we proposed to V-Trans, and they said, yep, go ahead and do it. So it was part of the TPI work plan that created this list. So this list of 10 projects didn't come out of like thin air. It came out of a series of consultations, meetings with communities, meetings with TAC or whatever. But there was this list of 10 projects, the biggest one of which is Macy Road, biggest, most expensive, because that's I don't know, like $1 million project. It's not a cheap project. But then like Cliff said, there was this phase, well, there was a long time where nothing happened. Because V-Trans had too many other things capturing its attention. But then starting about the same time Cliff started, they indicated that they were doing stuff. And it seems like they finally gave this list of projects to people like Karen Bates. And Karen, she apologized for not being here. Maybe she'll log in, because I said she frees up at 12:30. And if she logs in, let's just make sure we know it. People like Karen reviewed the list, and they gave a thumbs down to that Macy Road project because it doesn't have enough water quality benefit, or it just didn't meet their requirements. And so instead of it being 10 projects, it's 9. And I know that it was, or at least my perspective is that it was so much work to get the original list. We're not telling anybody, oh, well, we'll fill in projects because there's room. It's that, oh, okay, maybe there will come a time because of these other issues that Cliff mentioned at the very end, where Federal Highways has said, no, you can't do that project for this reason. It may be that there's another effort made where there will be some projects. I mean, I think it was a very municipally focused effort the first time, but maybe the next time, if there is a next time, it will involve more folks to come up with project ideas. But as it stands right now, we're waiting for V-Trans to get back to the Regional Planning Commission with an indication of how many more projects, if any, had to be cut from that list of now 9. And then what are we gonna do about it?
What is on the list?
Sorry?
What's on the list?
Okay, so,
Yeah, we can't get into Cliff's line. So.
Oh, okay, go. That's gonna be problematic.
Cliff can't get into Cliff's car?
Yeah.
On the black Buick.
Thank you so much. I'm like, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just gotta
Wow.
go.
does he have AAA? Oh,
I don't know.
okay.
Oh,
So projects that are on the list, there's a memo, and I should have prepared it, or maybe he's got it close. There are a lot of town projects, although, you have some projects that were listed as, so Grand Avenue.
Greenwich.
Yeah, so there were some in Swanton, there were some road culvert projects, I think in Fairfield or Sheldon. I don't have them committed to memory, but we can circulate the list.
Yeah, I was just really curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that Ken was interested in getting the update because Macy Road, I think he may have been looking for ways to help crack that nut. And at one time, people thought this was gonna be the way that that nut was going to be cracked.
What they want to issue your
What
project?
is, yeah, what they want.
I can speak to
Yeah, you
that.
can.
I was there from the beginning on that, and so it's a road that's in the bend of a river, continually facing erosion. And it's like 2 miles in the river, so it's constantly, there's been a previous fix that was like 300,000 10 years ago. And there are many other spots opening up, so it's persistent, so the town wanted to fix the one most urgent spot. And V-Trans was helping with that, but we stepped back and said, we can't fix all of these holes, so we got a brick grant from FEMA to look at the whole thing. Does the road need to be relocated? Do we need to buy houses? What, do we armor the whole bank? What's the best fix? And I think they might still be in the middle of that study. So I don't know if they've come to a conclusion about what the best fix is, which could be another reason it's kicked from the list. But our projects in Swanton are just little tiny things that would be really beneficial. And they've just been on this perpetual list forever. It's absurd. It's absurd that it has gone through so many false starts.
Sit in Highgate? Is that right?
It's in height,
Highgate, yeah,
just north of the shoulder.
and the road is, I can't remember, 80 feet above the river, and it's on the river. So it's a very vulnerable stretch of road.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go.
When was this landslide?
The first one I think was 2013, they fixed that. And now, that whole section that is pressed up against the river there is just crumbling daily. You can see, little mini slides all over.
This is the road where the new bridge was built.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
Richard J. Noel Bridge,
what's that?
that's the road. Richard, the Richard Noel Bridge is.
Richard Noel, yes.
Oh, yes.
Fix it.
Just,
Yes.
So how far before you get to 78 is this? 105, I'm sorry.
105, yeah, well, it's coming from
Okay.
78 in East Highgate. And then it goes out to 105 by, I don't know what you call that corner, Dean probably knows. But that's the stretch that's on the river.
You never noticed it. I know.
In Swanton, is it like the small projects, is it like culvert projects, or is it what kind of road projects?
Stormwater projects, one is on a smaller road, but the one is on, Route 7, Grand Avenue. And it's, bringing water away from, there is a culvert there, but there's a lot of erosion around the edge. So it would be putting in just some drop-ins. They're not large amounts of money for these projects. I don't remember. We had Cliff helped us get a preliminary design done. Because we thought, well, maybe if we get a design, that'll get us to the next queue, and then they were like, yeah.
So Kent was interested in that topic. If there are others, let me know, and I'll try to remember to get that listed, just so people have it. And
I put it in Nora's minutes for him.
just maybe to keep rolling along in terms of other updates, I just wanted to, how many of you get this email from DEC? You might already have seen it. They get their DEC, there's, I guess, probably more than one DEC email news blast, but one that came out yesterday, I think, was mentioning that, they are circulating a draft of the funding policy, and this, many of you know, the funding policy bears on the work that we do because it has statements in it, like you can't use herbicides on riparian buffer planting projects and things like that. And they normally update it every 2 years, or so. I think maybe ideally it's every year, but they decided that they're gonna be releasing it in chunks. or batches, and so stream type definitions and decision tree is part of the first batch. Outlet and gully stabilization on developed lands is gonna be addressed in this. It's the policy that's gonna end up making a difference in whether or not you can do certain things. Gully culvert project type decision tree, forest roads and skid trails. So those are the things that are in it. There's we will send this out, but again, I think some of you probably already get it. The email explains how to make a comment. I just wanted people to know, because it isn't always the easiest thing to get your thoughts together and put them down and send them in, but it's gonna be important that you do. Things that are coming down in the later batches, what's regulatory, they're gonna try to clarify that. O&M related issues they're gonna try to address, co-funding they're gonna try to address. Review by Division for Historic Preservation, Kent might like that one, because I know he's had opinions in the past. Project development.
Lots of us have opinions on that one.
100 recorders, and then there's a third batch that's after that, but anyway, I just wanted people to know that. Can we go to future meetings?
Please, yeah.
Future meetings, next meeting, October 1st. Seems weird to be beginning of October, but we'll have applications to review because the next funding round is gonna open up next week. And with the deadline in September, we'll have applications to review. One of the things that, was explored for this meeting was to have someone from Quebec talk about what is going on in Quebec, the Quebec portion of the Missisquoi. That did not pan out for tonight or for today, but we will be trying to do something like that in the future.
Doing some sort of tree planting, all of their highways and their like,
We
drove to Quebec City
Oh, that's right.
on Thursday. There are so many trees being planted along their highway.
Huh.
It's nuts.
Huh.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, well, part of the reason, well, some of the names that were given to people to contact, is Jim still in the meeting? Jim Pease is working on a project in Vermont, and Jim, are you still there? So anyway, it seems like an interesting topic to learn a little bit more about.
Dean, I've been trying to text you for like an hour. Anyway.
You've been trying to text me. Oh, my phone is in my.
Well, or chat, rather chat.
In the
sorry.
chat.
Oh, it's a chat, not working.
Anyway,
So,
we can't see any of your stuff that's online. But yeah, I mean, it does sound like if you want to talk to somebody, I mean, Sutton, Saint Armand and Poton are interested in doing more water quality, but I think there are many more towns in Quebec, and perhaps the best person to talk to the group might be the I mean, I think it's in French, but the Missisquoi Bay
OBB.
Watershed Association in Quebec.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So I
And-
sent them a note, but nobody
Yeah.
gets back to you the way they used to, so.
I just saw.
Yeah, I mentioned Jim in an email that you might not have seen, that I've had contact with Pierre Leduc, who's the president in the past, and that was because of his presentation at a friend's meeting a couple or 3 years ago. So he was just a very, very busy man, and that's why I didn't start with him, but he may be the.
I mean, right, that's what it sounds like. Quebec, they're very, very busy. Because we'd hope to get Sutton to talk for 15 minutes at lunchtime, but it's just impossible. So
They're busy planting trees along their highways.
well, probably, yeah, or making baguettes.
Well, sorry for not having the slides visible. So that was. So, yeah, people know that there's gonna be a tour.
Right.
It's not far from here, just down the road, hang a right, go down the road and hang another right, and it'll be on your left.
Yeah, I didn't bring a sign because I forgot, but it's
Caravan.
pretty not obvious, but once you find it, it's obvious.
It's called Reservoir Road.
There's no sign,
But there's a big culvert.
there's a big culvert, so you're going across the culvert. Dean, I'm wondering on the funding policy. I know that the NRPC has moved procurement and bid phase services out of implementation into final design. Is that something that we should be commenting on?
Well, we have a conversation about procurement coming up Tuesday, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about it then.
Okay, that sounds. Another thought, but still gone. Thanks for being on. Is Cliff still listening to the back? Cliff is.
No, still locked out.
That's stressful. Yeah, this wasn't you. Right?
Right?
It's the discoverer.
I thought it was just me, but. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, any final thoughts? Including thoughts? Oh, everybody got those dates? Jean's got them up there?
Is it possible to have your rounds further out for planning purposes?
Like.
More than the two that are on the next two, yeah, there's a spreadsheet that we can put forward.
That'd be helpful. We're trying to figure out what year our implementation we should be aiming for on some of the projects that we're like 30% design now. Or do we try to shove it through, or do we try?
Yeah, the dates have been put on the
Standardized.
calendar through 2026 or something. So yeah, they're available, just
Right.
no one had made the ask of putting them up further on the website, but we can do that.
Put the game plan in your head.
Well, I think we might otherwise have 6 implementation projects next summer, and that's not gonna work. That's not gonna work for me.
So if there's no final comments, then we'll take a motion to adjourn / recess / lunch / field trip.
I have one question. I'm just curious, how did Giddings Brook go? Is it done? Is it finished? Or,
Tree planting,
yeah,
Oh, how did Giddings Brook go?
the trees went great. They were all planted mostly by the end of, or by like early May, so they were in early enough, which was great. And they got 1 round of herbicide before we realized we weren't allowed to be using herbicide. And now there's a O&M contract with, I'm assuming Red Start.
So we've given them a draft,
Right.
which they're looking at, which was written in a way that basically says, once DEC approves it, then you go forward with it. And DEC agreed with that approach. So things weren't taken out of the management plan and then would have to be put back in.
Right.
But they have a draft. It's in front of them.
Right. And so I guess just like blanket statement, right now, you can't use herbicide on any tree planting, or what's going on?
Well, invoices with herbicide treatments in them have been paid
Great,
by the QUISP, and I'm assuming that when we get our reimbursement request in, that it will pay for that, but I can't encourage the use of herbicides until DEC says, and would they tell us that it's coming?
so let's say hypothetically, fully hypothetically. We have a tree planting we wanna do to replace funding, but it needs site treatment in the fall. We get somebody else to do it and does not
So-
bill you for it?
Well, okay, so talking about the specific projects, if that's what you're meaning, so,
This is an unknown project.
okay, so,
Hypothetically.
is it in the ground now? I mean,
No, so nothing's been planned, this is a future potential
yeah,
project.
so, I mean, DEC should have this figured out by December, so we should not have this.
Well, but herbicide needs to be applied in the fall for spring planting.
Oh. Well, I can't. I mean, we can bug Rachel to see whether or not she's got a timeline, but my understanding is that the policy should be changing this fall. Like
It says
when
you
exactly?
cannot Spray.
So
It says you cannot spray.
that's,
no.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of nuts, but
Okay.
the best we've been able to do so far is to get them to say that we could sign a contract with someone that lists both types of activities that says you could do the herbicide treatments when DEC says. And we've written it to be as like open as we could. So if we had something from DEC that says, yes, you can use herbicides, and it came in an email from Rachel, because I know that she's thinking about it, right? She was
Right,
thinking about it
right.
when she did the class review.
Yeah,
That's all I need.
okay. It just, I know it's not, this is in no way directed at you, by the way, it's just frustrating.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's like,
And I think she wants to resolve it, whether or not she's gotta go 3 steps up is maybe the big issue.
the scale of what's sprayed for tree planting compared to what is sprayed on corn,
Right,
is just hilarious.
but it's different departments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but maybe not.
Maybe not. So any other questions, or Jim, did that update satisfy you?
Yeah, I just apologize for not being able to volunteer. I was sugaring and just impossible to get over on one of the days that it was not raining. I think
Yeah.
you canceled a couple of them, right?
They were a couple of rescheduled due to snow and
So
just awful weather,
okay.
but such as tree planting now in Vermont, I
Yeah.
guess. But yeah, they all got in, happily. Hopefully they live, hopefully the beavers don't get home. Find out.
Any other concluding thoughts or questions? Or would someone like to motion to adjourn recess field trip lunch?
Motion to adjourn recess field trip lunch.
Seconded.
Thank you, Lauren and Bridget. All in favor? You had 7 now. Awesome.
Have fun.
Have fun. Wish I was
I'm going back out.
Everybody.